Hey everyone, Rua here with a job guide that's been a long time coming. Of all the requests I've had to cover certain jobs, Ninja has been far and away the most popular. Ninja's a recurring job in the Final Fantasy series, and its iteration of Final Fantasy XI bears many of the hallmarks its series predecessors wore. It's a job that's flitted in and out of prominence throughout the game's life, and it's finally come to settle in a place a lot of players really don't know much about, I've found. So I guess it's down to me to hopefully shed some light on it. There's a lot to cover here, so we best get into it. At its core, the Ninja is a DPS with the capacity to serve as a tank in certain situations. It uses katanas as its primary weapons, uses throwing shuriken with likewise great skill, and also has access to a unique branch of magic called Ninjutsu. You'll notice that all of those are exclusive to the Ninja, and this is probably why the wider player base knows relatively little about how Ninja works and what it has to offer. Ninja's most famous characteristic is its ability to avoid attacks through Utsuzemi shadows, something which made it extremely popular back at 75 cap, and partially which made it such a popular subjob for the longest time. So, what does the job have going for it? What needs to be said first is that the Ninja is extremely durable. Whether it's through Utsuzemi shadows or Migawari, this is a job that can stay in a fight for a very long time before it has to withdraw to the back lines. Complementing this is a Ninja's innately high evasion and magic evasion stats. Ninja gets a lot of both, but you need to look at the magic evasion gifts it gets on its road to master, see its gear selection, then you'll see what I'm really getting at here. Ninja also has a huge amount of subtle blow available, so it's not going to be feeding a lot of TP to its enemies. Throw all of this together and you have a really sturdy job which shines against enemies you really do not want to hit you. Offensively, the Ninja's no slouch either. It's a competitive DPS when fully supported, but it takes a fair bit of know-how to pull it off. Ninja also covers magic damage very well with its elemental ninjutsu spells, which can hit extremely hard when properly geared and supported. It also has access to hybrid weapon skills with physical and magical components, which can likewise hit some pretty high numbers. Finally, Ninja's the only job in the game which can actually fully recover from being weakened. It's a neat trick which can really save the day in some unexpected ways. Still, as with every other job, there's problems. Ninja's a more complex job than most DPS jobs, so it's got a high skill ceiling and it can be hard for new players to fully grasp. This ceiling and learning curve has likely put off more than a few players to the job. It demands a player at the wheel who doesn't clock out easily, as you've got a very small margin for error and any mistake you make could be heavily punished, especially when you're tanking. I mentioned support a fair bit in the previous section, and that was because a Ninja really is reliant on buffs from other jobs to really shine. Now, the same could be said for any other DPS job, but I've personally found that the gulf in damage between an unsupported Ninja and a fully supported Ninja to be rather wide. More to the core of the job, if you're made to recast spells mid-battle, that will always result in a DPS loss, because you're taking the time out to cast rather than to TP or weapon skill. It's often necessary, but it's something you need to know. While it works as a tank, a Ninja just lacks the same enmity tools a Paladin or Runefencer have. You're kinda reliant on your melee DPS to keep enmity off your other melee DPS in your group. But if they're getting the same buffs you are, then they could tear enmity off you, especially if you're taking time out to cast spells like I mentioned just then. Ninja also feels as though it fares better in one-on-one fights. If what you're fighting calls in for backup, you'll probably find your Utsuzemi shadows not lasting very long, which will leave you wide open if your recast timers are down. On a similar note, Ninja also doesn't do very good against targets which spam AoE. AoE spells especially will clear your shadows in one go, and this can get very frustrating very quickly. Finally, while Migawari is a great safety net, it doesn't work against everything. Don't rely on it too much. Here's how I recommend doing merits on Ninja. Group 1 and Group 2 are really connected here, so you want to max out the effects of the two Sun tier spells you're likewise maxing out in Group 2. You won't ever need to merit Subtle Blow, as you've got enough of that already. Sange is actually a great ability, but it comes at too great a cost as it chews through your shuriken like a fiend. I'll go into Sange later on despite the fact I don't have it merited, because I really have to show you this so you understand where I'm coming from. Ninja Tool expertise is a cop-out, as all it's doing is saving you some small pocket change, so don't merit it over what will actually help you and help your group out. Mijin Gaku is a ninja's first SP ability, and contrary to running gag that it's only any good as a free warp, it actually does serve a purpose. Rather than annihilating entire groups and dynamis, what the player version of Mijin Gaku does is just KO the ninja while doing some damage. But it also removes weakness status, the only ability in the game to do so actually. Unless you're using the Nagi, the relic katana, you'll need to use a re-raise item before using it, otherwise you really will put yourself down for good until you get raised. Mijin Gaku can be used to recover from mistakes, provided that you've landed a DOT on your target to prevent it from regenerating HP while you yourself recover. Dokomorai's poison should do it. Yonin is one of the 2 stance abilities Ninja gets. Yonin increases your evasion, increases your enmity, reduces your enemy's critical hit rate, and also gives you a helping and ninja tool expertise, even if you don't have it merited. Which is another reason to not bother meriting it in the first place. Its effects are only active while you're in front of your target, so it really is your tanking stance. Something that you don't see in Yonin's description though, is that it also greatly increases the enmity generated by Utsuzemi spells, which really helps when you're trying to keep your target's attention. I actually don't know the exact amount of enmity generated, but speaking as someone used to Rune Fencer, it feels very similar to Foil. A handy trick you can pull off is to go up the order of Utsuzemi spells to quickly spike your hate, as Utsuzemi Ichi is overwritten by Utsuzemi Ni, and Utsuzemi Ni is overwritten by Utsuzemi San. Inin's the flip side of Yonin, in that it's your DPS stance rather than your tanking one. When you're behind your target, Inin lowers your enmity and evasion while increasing your accuracy, critical hit rate, and ninjutsu damage. While the boost to accuracy is nice, it's the critical hit rate and the ninjutsu damage which really make an impact here. You'll crit like crazy when Inin's up, improving your white damage as well as blade high should you be using it. The best part of Inin though is what it does to your spell damage, which can help you reach some absurdly high burst numbers. Now, something you need to know about both of these stances is that their effects decay over time before bottoming out at set value after 3 minutes. This set value remains in effect until the abilities fully wear off after 5. The good thing though is that both of these stances can be refreshed as soon as they hit this point, since their reuse time is above 3 minutes. They can also both be dispelled though, which can be a problem if you're facing something which just loves doing that. Fute increases the power of your next elemental ninjutsu spell by 50%, by almost 75% if you're using it with the Empyrean hands, while consuming 2 ninja tools as a trade-off. Fute is typically used in conjunction with Inin before bursting off a skill chain to make the spell used with it hurt, and I really do mean hurt. I'll be sure to cover ninjutsu spells, elemental spells as well, properly later on in this guide. Isekigun increases your parrying rate and also gives you an enmity boost for each hit you parry while it's active. What really sells Isekigun though is that it provides both cumulative and volatile enmity almost in equal measure, job points permitting. Not only will Isekigun parries activate before all other forms of defense like evasion and Utsuzemi shadows, but it'll also skyrocket your enmity if you're facing something that multi-attacks a lot, as it preserves your shadows while keeping your target firmly on you. Given that you need to be on top of your target's enmity list for Isekigun to mean anything, it's typically used with Yonin when you're explicitly there for tanking. Still, it serves as a good emergency button if something nasty suddenly turns on you. Mikage is a ninja's second SP, and sadly it can be a pain to get the most out of. Mikage forces a random number of extra attacks proportional to the number of Utsuzemi shadows you have up. Mikage also grants a pretty big increase to Subtle Blow, which goes beyond the cap, and makes you feed practically no TP to your target while it's up. Mikage's problems is that it only affects your main hand weapon. The number of extra attacks you get fluctuates a bit too much for it to be reliable. And if what you're fighting likes casting AoE spells, or AoEs a lot generally, you're not going to get much use out of it. This is because if you stop TPing in the middle of Mikage to recast Utsuzemi shadows just to get Mikage's max effect back, you've still wasted time casting a spell in which you could have been TPing or weapon skilling, so there's kind of no point. To kick off the tips, tricks and tactics section, I'm best go into how Ninjutsu actually works. Ninjutsu spells cost no MP to cast, instead using ninja tools. Each ninjutsu spell needs different tools to cast, but rather than haul around mountains of tools, it's honestly better to just use master ninja tools. Master tools can only be used by a ninja main job. Using them from a sub job won't work, and they can be used for every spell you have. Ninja tools will always be consumed whenever a ninjutsu spell is successfully cast, unless you have the ninja tool expertise trait, which gives you a set chance of not consuming the tool. Since you're not meriting it though, you're only ever going to see it during Yonin stance or with the relic gloves, which will give you a set amount of the trait, which actually exceeds what you'd even get from merits in the first place. Most ninjutsu spells have 2 or 3 tiers, but rather than being labelled 1, 2 or 3 like white or black magic are, they're labelled Ichi, Ni and San, 1, 2 and 3 in Japanese. Ninjutsu spells are all affected by the standard fare of precast equipment like fast cast, but certain pieces specifically increase Utsuzemi's casting speed, like the Passion Jacket and the Magaraga bead necklace. Utsuzemi in particular is far better when used from a ninja main than from a ninja sub. Utsuzemi Ni from a ninja main has 4 shadows as its baseline, rather than the 3, while Utsuzemi San has 5. Ninja also gets 2 JSE pieces which add even more shadows to each of your spells. Utsuzemi Ichi can reach 5 shadows, Utsuzemi Ni 6, and Utsuzemi San 7. Utsuzemi Ichi is overwritten by Utsuzemi Ni, and Utsuzemi Ni is overwritten by Utsuzemi San. You need to keep this in mind, because if you try to cast a lower tier of Utsuzemi while you still have shadows from a higher tier active, that spell will fail to take effect and you could be left wide open with no shadows and be left waiting on your recast timer. You can buy all of your ninja tools, master tools included, at the Curio vendor Mughals in the main cities. The Mughals will also sell shuriken pouches, which you'll need until you get the higher level shuriken from NM drops. Enfeebling ninjutsu spells have some niche and practical uses generally, but when you're tanking they can really make your life a lot easier. Urine puts an inhibit TP effect on your target which slows down its TP gain, similar to a monk's penance ability. Coupled with your subtle blow effect, this will really slow down enemy TP attacks. Aisha lowers your target's attack power, so any attacks which still get through won't hit you as hard. Kuriyami blinds your target while Hojo slows it down. If you're in a group, both of these spells can generally be covered by a mage job, a red mage especially, as their slow and blind effects will be a lot stronger than yours. Jubaku paralyzes your target, but its potency pales in comparison to a weapon skill you get which also paralyzes. Blade Retsu's paralysis is not only accurate, but it also has an activation rate of roughly 30% according to various sources. These sources are probably spot on, as you absolutely can notice the difference between Jubaku and Retsu's paralysis rates. You need to get into the habit of counting the number of Utsuzemi shadows you have left, and be ready to react when you only have 1 or 2 remaining. Ninjas can win some very tough battles no other job would stand a chance of surviving if they keep on top of this and seldom make mistakes. Remember, player mistakes are very heavily punished on this job. A lot of this will take time and practice to get down, but when you do you'll be amazed at just how well Ninja can handle itself. Aside from Utsuzemi, the other crucial defensive spell Ninja has is Migawari. Migawari is a beefed up version of a Bard Scherzo song, in that it'll outright negate almost any attack which would take greater than a certain percentage of your maximum HP. The percentage threshold is determined by your ninjutsu skill at the time of casting, so if you have Migawari up and you take an attack which would normally one-shot you, you'll evade the attack entirely. Migawari is a great spell which gives a ninja a lot of survivability when engaged, but you need to be careful not to rely on it too much, as there are some attacks which completely ignore it. Unlike Scherzo, however, Migawari will wear off as soon as it's taken the hit for you, but fortunately you can get its recast down pretty low with capped haste. It's also down to you to keep an eye on it and recast it when it falls. Your group may be counting on you to do so, so you'll really need to pay attention. Another thing you need to get into the habit of doing is changing your stances to adapt to your situation. Inin is your DPS stance, but when your tank dies in this situation, you need to be ready to snap into Yonin stance and take over while they recover. Fortunately, you'll already have some enmity built up if you're attacking before your tank died, so your target won't automatically make a beeline for your backline. You'll have noticed that I have both stances macroed with a corresponding enmity boost or reduction spells following shortly after. This way, you're not left fumbling for the right spell, something that you may not be able to afford if all hell's broken loose. This is something I do recommend you copy. Pause this video if you need to see it better. You may have also noticed that I've been throwing shuriken while auto-attacking, and you may have been wondering how I was doing that with no other input. That's down to Ninja's Daken job trait. Daken makes a ninja occasionally throw shuriken when they are equipped while attacking, essentially adding more hits to an attack round and giving you more TP in the process. Daken by itself does not consume the shuriken when it activates, but this is where Sangei comes in. Sangei forces Daken to always activate on an attack round, but it will make Daken consume shuriken. Some of Ninja's best shuriken cannot be bought, and are instead rare drops from certain high level NMs. Herein lies the problem with Sangei. If you're using Sangei, you'll blaze through precious shuriken, and before you know it you'll be back to farming NMs to replenish your supply, before you inevitably run out again. Sangei is also not necessary on account of the fact that Daken already has a high activation rate. Daken's base rate is 40%, 54% when job mastered, and 64% with a +3 artifact hands from Omen. The two best shuriken Ninja gets are the Seki shuriken and the Togakushi shuriken. I typically use Seki when accuracy is not a problem, and Togakushi when it is. Shuriken thrown via Daken get a +100 ranged accuracy bonus, but they can still miss like any other attack, so you need to configure your TP set to accommodate Daken. Fortunately, Ninja's high-end gear selection is well suited to accommodating both accuracy and ranged accuracy in the same slots, but you've still got a balancing act on your hands though. You need to work in accuracy, ranged accuracy, store TP and multi-attack into a well-rounded set while also avoiding increasing your dual wield stat. Dual wield works by lowering your combined weapon delay, which in turn determines your base TP per hit. Put simply, it's much better to reach the delay cap through capping haste, rather than piling on mountains of dual wield. In fact, if you're fully capped with magic haste, you don't even need any dual wield gear in your TP set at all. Adding more would just hurt your TP gain. Here's the accuracy and ranged accuracy stats you ideally want to be aiming for. Remember, since you get 100 ranged accuracy from Daken, you can afford to have your ranged accuracy slightly lower than your melee accuracy. Elemental Ninjutsu can hit really damn hard, but you need to know what you're doing to pull it off properly. Elemental Ninjutsu spells follow the same rules as elemental magic, in that int and magic attack bonus increase their damage. Ninjutsu skill also increases their damage, but it's not really worth using skill pieces over those which boost both of the former. Inin is going to be your default stance for getting high damage from these spells, because, given its effect, the sooner into Inin's duration you use the spells, the harder they're going to hit. You're going to want to burst your spells, but fortunately doing both light and darkness skill chains is pretty easy on Ninja, so you'll have no problem pulling it off. Katon deals fire damage and reduces your target's evasion against water damage. With this in mind, you can use the opposing element before a skill chain to soften your target up, but generally speaking it's not necessary unless whatever you're fighting has really high magic evasion or is a much higher level than you. In those situations you're likely going to have other forms of support available against higher end targets to close this gap for you. You can still do good damage without Fute, but when you start adding Geomancer spells like Acumen and Malaise, they can start getting close to hitting the damage cap. Believe me, I've seen it done. Putting together a strong burst set can take a bit of work, and it'll probably take you a while to get it all together, but it's a goal well worth pursuing if you're serious about this job. The cap for magic burst bonus is 40%, and Ninja gets the first 2 tiers of that trait, so that's 7% right there off the bat. You're going to need 33% to reach the cap, but the odd thing is, a lot of Ninja's burst equipment is actually magic burst bonus too, which means it breaks the cap, and you'll end up going beyond the 40% cap without even realizing it. My set is 62% burst bonus total, 37% from burst bonus and 25% from burst bonus too. I recommend using the Heishai Shorinken in your main hand and an Ochu in the offhand. You can use 2 Ochus until you get the Heishai. I strongly suggest going out of your way to get the +3 relic head from Dynamis Divergence, as it alone adds a massive amount of power to your Sun tier spells especially, which are your main sources of magic damage. Tanking on Ninja is different from tanking on Paladin, and to a lesser extent Rune Fencer, as you simply lack the enmity tools to keep up conventionally. Instead, you need to be dealing a constant stream of damage to keep hold of your target. To do this though, you need to forego a lot of pure DT gear and aim for a TP set with some slight adjustments in it. Since you're not in a pure DT set, you need to keep on top of your shadows and Migawari to stay alive, as a stray major hit which gets Sprue could end you in one hit. Like I mentioned earlier, and this really does bear repeating, you've got very little margin for error here, and I recommend practicing this in smaller group content before progressing to high-end content. You'll want to refresh Yonin as soon as you can to maintain its effects at maximum strength, and recast Utsuzemi frequently for the extra enmity generation. Remember, you can go from Utsuzemi Ichi to Ni to San without leaving yourself open, while also generating enmity from each successive spell you just cast. Still, chances are you're going to have some trouble keeping your target off the other DPS in your group if they're competent at getting the same buffs as you. You'll eventually get enmity back, but your other DPS need to be ready to take some hits. When tanking, the set I suggest you use is the Kendetsuba set because it has a lot of accuracy, ranged accuracy, triple attack, critical hit rate and subtle blow. All the great things you'll need to TP effectively. Above all though, it also has abnormally high amounts of magic evasion, enough to rival the equipment Rune Fencer gets actually. You should also have a pure DT set ready for attacks you just can't avoid. Migawari will cover you for the most part, but it won't cover everything. I've linked my DT set, as well as every other set you've seen in this guide below in the video's description. Ninja has access to a handful of hybrid weapon skills which at first glance don't seem very strong, but when you understand them and gift them properly, they can end up hitting harder than your physical weapon skills. Hybrid weapon skills are called such because they factor in both physical and magic components when determining their damage. Since a ninja can get a good helping of MAB from its equipment options, it's well suited to taking advantage of them. Hybrid weapon skills need a mixture of weapon skill damage, MAB, accuracy, magic accuracy, attack, as well as their stat modifiers. This seems like a tall order, but it's really a lot easier than you'd imagine, as they're pretty much a mashup of your weapon skill set and your elemental ninjutsu set. Again, as with elemental ninjutsu, when you start adding geomancer spells to the equation, they start hitting really hard. Malaise and frailty lower magic defense and physical defense respectively, so when coupled together, your target's wide open for some pretty major damage. Hybrid weapon skills also respond very well to multi-attack procs. This is where Corsair rolls come in. If your target's defense is being flawed by a geomancer, then consider having a Corsair use Fighter's roll over Chaos roll, and you may start seeing weapon skills for near cap damage. Bard songs will also help out with the physical accuracy and attack aspects of the hybrid weapon skills, but I'd say that a Geomancer and a Corsair will make the relatively greater impact. It's also worth mentioning that Ninja's elemental weapon skills like Blade Eye will completely bypass forms of physical defense, like shadows, defense bonuses, and even invincible. Like I said, your hybrid weapon skill set will pretty much be a mashup of your WSD set and your elemental ninjutsu set. So when you have both of those sorted out, putting together a set for these weapon skills will be pretty simple. You can use my set here as a guideline if you need it. I think that pretty much covers the key bases, so I'll wrap this guide up here. Ninja's a job that should be a welcome addition to most content, as it can hold its own while contributing both physical and magic damage, as and when needed. A new player to the job has a fair bit to take on board when starting it up, but hopefully this guide will be a useful aid to make it easier to get into. Anyhow, I'll sign off here. See you next time.